Harvard law professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz also says this House letter is reminiscent of the letters written by Senator Joseph McCarthy in the early 1950s when he and his henchmen, as Dershowitz put it, urged television networks and movie studios to drop anyone suspected of being a communist or even a leftist. Here's what Dershowitz writes, quote, "All decent people who care about freedom of speech without regard to right or left political viewpoints must stand strongly in opposition to the censorial pressures being exerted by these benighted members of Congress." Dershowitz goes on to write that CNN and MSNBC, not mentioned in the letter, deny their viewers facts and information that might influence their decision in a nuanced manner, but this does not concern Eshoo or McNerney because those networks present their side of the narrative. And joining us now to talk more about this is Harvard law professor emeritus and Newsmax analyst Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, great to see you.
Thank you so much. You know, this really brings back memories to me. I remember watching with my father the House Un-American Activities Committee back in the 1950s when they did exactly the same thing. They hauled witnesses in front of them. They criticized newspapers and television and radio and Hollywood studios who were too far left. Now the shoe is on the other foot, but it's causing the same amount of blisters on the First Amendment. And what we're seeing is an attempt to really weaponize the First Amendment on one side of the political spectrum and against the other side. Look, I'm a liberal Democrat. I'm not on the conservative Republican side, but I'm on the side of the First Amendment for all. The greatest offender here, if you're going to talking about fake news and misinformation, the greatest offender is CNN. They are the worst. They doctor tapes. They edit news clips, news bites, sound bites. They ban people like me from presenting an alternative point of view on their network. They make President Trump say things he didn't say. For example, when in his two most controversial speeches, CNN omitted the president in the Capitol saying peacefully and patriotically, "We want your voices heard," from most of their broadcasts.
And as did the members of Congress.
They did the same thing.
As did members of Congress during the impeachment trial. And clearly, you know, they're not even attempting to show any level, any even Nansen amount of bipartisanship or equity, as they like to call it in these types of situations. And it's the disinformation that's being pushed here. When you cloak it in the setting of a congressional hearing, it provides a lot more legitimacy to what they're trying to do here. But even for a layperson like myself, it would be hard to think of a more obvious example of a blatant abuse of the First Amendment. Government officials leaning on private corporations trying to determine what information they can and cannot distribute.
And I do think that this raises First Amendment questions, even though these cable platforms are private. When they do things at the behest of the government, they become state actors. It also raises questions about the fairness doctrine. If you really had a fairness doctrine that was fair, that would be one thing. I would be opposed to it anyway because it interferes. It puts the government in the newsrooms and editorial rooms of First Amendment purveyors like Newsmax. But you think that the fairness doctrine is going to be administered fairly by these members of Congress who are already showing their unfairness and their bias? You know, I have a new book coming out exactly on this subject now. It's called The Case Against the New Censorship. Big tech, progressives, and universities are now the, quote, good censors. They're trying to censor in the interest of progressive liberal values. And of course, it's no different from McCarthyism. It's worse. It's more dangerous because many of them are well-intentioned.
It is more dangerous, and I think a lot of it has to do too with, as you can, we can kind of get into this too, the difference between the public's airwaves and a private cable provider. We'll learn more about that. The difference between a broadcast network and a cable news network, when we see the broadcast networks would actually have an FCC license, so blatantly doing this in the opposite direction, and they don't face nearly the same kind of scrutiny that conservative media faces, both on social media and on cable, and it was never set up for that type of regulatory environment.
And it's just not clear that the government has any role to play whatsoever in regulating private companies that disseminate information. The government does not belong in the newsrooms. It does not belong in the editorial rooms of any purveyors of First Amendment information. And it's very upsetting that you have hearings about this. Look, who can complain about hearings? Hearings are designed to produce information. No, not these hearings. They're designed to intimidate. They were just like the House Un-American Activities Committee. They weren't gathering information. They were deciding to try to put pressure on Hollywood studios and on television stations. They came up with this concept called red channels. They produced books that attacked television stations for allowing people on the left to be on. Today, again, the shoe is on the other foot, and I put shoes on my feet equally. I'm as concerned about right-wing censorship as I am about left-wing censorship. I support the First Amendment for all. As
Voltaire instructed us, and as anyone knows who's looked at the First Amendment, why it's so important, you know, it's not the speech that we like that needs protecting many times. It's the speech we don't like, because the day that, you know, the speech that we don't like gets scrapped and we don't care, we are next. I want to bring in Michelle Malkin here just to kind of emphasize this point. Professor Dershowitz obviously coming at this from a civil libertarian's perspective, but on the left, Michelle Malkin, you know, a conservative journalist. She's looked at this issue very critically as well. And Michelle, it's great to have you here with us for this conversation as well, because the chilling effect here is obvious. You have seen this coming from a long way away. I mean, this has been going on for a long time, but to see it in such an explicit and obvious manner in this letter, where you have two Democratic members of Congress from Silicon Valley leaning on these television networks. They don't seem willing to lean on Google and YouTube and Apple and all the tech companies as much, but they are trying to tell these companies what they can and cannot distribute to their customers. Chilling.
It is chilling, and this stifling of conservative activism, conservative politics, and conservative speech is, as Alan Dershowitz noted, part of a long line that goes back to the McCarthy era. I want to give a little bit more recent historical context, because this is not the initiation of the renewal of the fairness doctrine. This is a continuation, and many of the same players that were in the Obama-Biden administration during dating back to 2009, who launched this effort are back again. Anita Dunn, for example, the top senior advisor, when she served under Obama-Biden, had as her chief primary responsibility intimidating and chilling the speech of conservative cable TV platforms, and specifically attacking conservative TV hosts. I think it's worth noting, of course, in the wake of the tragic and sad passing of the giant Rush Limbaugh, that he was the original target of the fairness doctrine.
No, it's an important point. And I think this is almost a way, Michelle, for them to troll us a little bit more and twist the knife a little bit to make that hurt a little bit more, because, you know, there was a time in the late 90s when Rush Limbaugh was such a foil to Bill Clinton, and he dulled their political power, the Democrats' power. Professor Dershowitz, what do you think about that? I mean, Rush Limbaugh is often held up by Democrats as a cautionary tale on why they still need the fairness doctrine.
No, I think if you don't like Rush Limbaugh, create a left-wing Rush Limbaugh to compete with him in the marketplace of ideas. I was not a fan of Rush Limbaugh. I occasionally listened to his radio show because it came on Martha's Vineyard when I was walking on the beach. I got it. It made me angry. I didn't like his show. I listened. I flipped the channel. I went to commentators that I preferred to listen to. That's the American way. This is not about whether you support conservative talk radio or Newsmax, which I do support, or Fox News. It's about having the ability to flip the channels. I want to be able to go from CNN to MSNBC to Fox to Newsmax. That's the only way I get anything like the truth today. I'm certainly not going to get it by listening to CNN or reading the New York Times or listening to PBS.
Right.
You have to have multiple sources of information.
A free and fair, competitive marketplace for the media is what we need, and it's what we deserve in this country, and it's what we absolutely must have if we are going to call ourselves a republic. And
people are very upset at Newsmax because they're winning the war in the marketplace of ideas. For whatever reasons, as they get more and more popular. The same thing with Rush Limbaugh, as I said. I'm not a fan. I admire what he did.
We are definitely competition now, and as they say, when you're taking flack, you are over the target, and that's where we're at right now. Professor Dershowitz, Michelle Malkin, thanks so much for setting this up for us.
Hi, Emma Reckenberg here. If you like this video, there's a whole lot more to see on Newsmax TV. You can watch for free right here on our YouTube live stream and be the first one here each time our experts break down real news. Just hit that subscribe button, ring the bell icon, and stay with us on America's fastest growing cable news channel, Newsmax TV.